This is a video in a series of videos about Stable Diffusion. I'm basically covering the automatic 1111 web UI interface. I'll link to the other two videos in the link below. In this video, I want to talk about the extensions tab, and specifically, we'll probably cover Dreambooth. Dreambooth, for those that don't know it, is an extension or a machine learning model that allows you to train Stable Diffusion with images of yourself so that you can do text to image generation, and it will kind of flexibly take photos and turn them into sculptures in this case, or comics, whatever. So I want to show how to do that. Before I do that, though, I want to kind of talk about how the process works. So basically, Stable Diffusion uses these models. In this case, the default current version of Stable Diffusion is the 1.5 pruned checkpoint, which you can download from Hugging Face. If you want to know how to install this application, Automatic 1111, there's plenty of tutorials on the web to do so, that show you how to do it. And then what'll happen is when you first come into it, you'll have basically this interface. I've disabled all the extensions that I normally have. Somebody had asked me how I got this highlight text right here, which shows, like, when I go to do a space, it'll autocomplete. So if I go, R, or if I want to put something like a style or something, so art underscore or nouveau. Let's do style. How about cartoon? And then you get all these different filled in sort of options for, let's do Cartoon Network here. And then if you run that and generate, so I've got this call for a Renaissance sculpture, and then the last thing I have is Cartoon Network. It'll probably still come back with a sculpture. It may try to do some sort of cartoon. Yeah, see, it changed it only slightly. Mainly the reason that works is because I put this at the very end of the prompt, and all of this other stuff is sort of forcing it towards a realistic marble sculpture, while this thing has very little weight. It's more like throwing in just some randomizer for the call there. But what I want to show you is that when you train these models, in this case, I've already trained this model, which was 2,000 samples on the default 1.5 model, using a set of these images. These images in particular, but like, you'll have these images, and the way you'll set them up is you'll want about 20. You can do less, you can do 12, whatever. You're going to want a series of head tilts and expressions on the faces. You're definitely going to want variation in terms of the colors of the clothes and the backgrounds that you're using, because what happens is the more something repeats in these images, the more it becomes embedded in the model. And I can show examples of that. So this is something similar to what I trained this original checkpoint on. It did pretty well in terms of giving me a variety of expressions and the ability to sort of flexibly use this this model. So I'll show you some examples of the images that I've come up with from it. So let me, I'll just generate. What I'm going to do is I'm dragging and dropping from, let's do something like this one. Yeah. So Victorian photo of Colin Freeman person. It'll use that same checkpoint. So instead of getting this sculpture now, it should do a black and white photo of me. Let's see what it comes back with. So yeah, this. Or you can go and do something like this. So In this case, I've got a Colin Freeman person who looks like George Jetson, cartoon character by Hanna-Barbera. Generate that. And it comes back with this. So now that's based on this original checkpoint, like I said, that uses these mostly photographs of me and mostly headshots, a lot of them having the same t-shirt, mostly the same background. It does pretty good. Having plain backgrounds helps. If you had just all of the same colored shirt on here, and what I did is I went into Photoshop and changed the backgrounds and some of the shirts on some of these to kind of add variability, which helped a lot. That helps to kind of like broaden the model. So if I run this on one of my later models, you'll see, so I'm going to set it to this V8 1500 sample checkpoint that I ran on a version of these that has more images that I actually just generated from let's do these. That's got like some actual images that I generated from the model itself, the original model. So what that does is it gives you more backgrounds. It's almost like reinforcement training where you can put in different backgrounds and increase the kind of quality of your data set, right? The reinforcement part is in that you look at these images that it's generated and say, yeah, that looks a lot like me. I'm going to use that as a training data. All of these are 512 by 512. The other thing, this is the result of training on some slightly different images. I had a couple in here that had, for this particular V8 model here, I had some images in there that had some like heavily shadowed eyes in the painting style, something like this kind of, but even more kind of hard edged. And what that did was it sort of embedded that eye type into the model so that when I generate based on that, it ended up making the eyes kind of hard edged a lot. So this is a different version of that one. Similar. Let me try. Let's try this. Actually, let me find one that'll actually show that. Let's go back to the statue. And when you do that send to text to image, it's going to go back to the original checkpoint, assuming that it's still loaded on your device. So you'll have to come back up here and set it to the one you want to test it on, let that load, and then generate from that. And you'll see sort of the problem with this newly trained version of the original model in that it comes in very heavily lit. It's got some sort of real lit, but it's pretty hard edged. And that was in part due to the kind of images. Here's another one that was generated from it. You can see what I'm talking about with the eyes, sort of heavily top down lit. So it just shows that like in this particular training point, I had a certain type of image that was weighting the model to go in a very specific direction. And it makes it less flexible. You can fix some of this by doing some negative prompts here. So like no shadows eyes or something like that maybe, and see what happens. Take out the highlights, but it's not as flexible as I wanted it to be. So I started doing some experiments to try to get an understanding of what it takes to make a really flexible model or training model for this for the Dreambooth. In doing so, I created this set of images, which starts with a lot of my originals here. And notice that I've got like 41 images here. Sometimes you can overdo this, but this seemed to work pretty well. This model got really flexible. You'll see that I've got a lot of blue suit images in here, actually a lot of suit images, period, but especially these blue suits. That shows up in the model. Um, you can easily just do no suit or put suit under the negative prompt to lose that a little bit, but it still sort of has that suit generality. So what I'd probably need to do, and again, from here to here, these are all Stable Diffusion generated portraits of myself that I went and made specifically to go and add better training in, because these photos, sometimes it's a pain in the butt to go and just change clothes and share photos. So I sort of started with this set and then started rendering versions. In this case, I kind of went too heavy on the suits. It shows up in the model, but it does do a much better job of creating the face stuff across a variety of styles. And I'll show you that. So here's the model V9 that was trained on these images. Like I said, if I was going to change something about this, I'd probably go and lose the suits on some of these images, which it's easy enough to do. I can just go grab the original image that I rendered and put it in there, and then drop the suit or put it in a different outfit, whatever. But when you render with this, I'm taking the same statue and the same. We can lose the no shadow eyes, and we'll render with that model now. You'll see that it comes back with a different take, i.e. a full statue here. And you're going to have to modify the prompt to get back to something useful. So we could go, we've got sculpture here. In the negative prompt, we could do crop, full body. Let's try that. Still there. We can change Renaissance sculpture. We could do bust. And Tina. Yeah, let's do sculpture there. So when you get a more flexible model, you may end up needing to, alter your prompts to get kind of more drive going in. So we could also, instead of Renaissance, let's just do marble. See what happens there. But you can see that this model does a much better job of taking the training data from my head and putting it into doing just full body shots as well. Part of that is if you look at the data that I trained it on, I've got a lot more of these mid-length torso shots. And there's been some debate, and if you look at the forums, about using full body shots for this training data and how it doesn't really seem to help. I would say that's true. And if you want to be able to get good full body shots, you should probably throw in some more of these mid-range, hips up type shots, because that will definitely drive the data more towards being able to do full body shots as opposed to head close-ups. So we could change this. Yeah, I mean, you see how it's working here. Now let me just show you the flexibility of this model, because here's a statue. It needs some work. I've got this restore faces on. If I turn that on, that'll probably fix the color up here. And I'll crank the sampling steps down so it doesn't take so long to render as well. And we'll go with something like 4 different, let's do a random seed. And the fact that it can do this side shot and do a pretty good job of it shows sort of the flexibility. Plus, you'll notice like there's no real blowout or highlights around the edges like there were in that second model. And that shows that it's a fairly good model training of the model, because when you get those highlights, it's sort of an indicative of kind of like the noise that's still in the model, that it's probably overtrained. So you can see we got some pretty good faces there. And if I crank up the config scale even more, or the CFG, and generate again, it'll start to look even more like my face. And then I'll show you some examples of alternative images that really show the flexibility that once you of what you can get once you get a really nice model trained, how varied you can take the data and make it look in terms of render styles. So if we go to PNG info, I'll just drop this guy in here. This was a vintage comic illustration from the 1930s in this case, choosing that same V9 checkpoint. Let's show what that does. So when you can get from something that looks like, photorealistic sculpture to something that also looks like you in a cartoon format with heavy line illustration like this, that's a really flexible tool to use, because like you can pretty much covers the range, right? I even pushed it a little bit further and went to something, let's do this one, just to show how flexible this model gets. So this was like vintage grayscale cartoon animation of a Colin Freeman person character, line art illustration, Whiskey Pete. I was trying to get to something like a 1930s Disney cartoon. Let's see what that does. So there's the kind of vintage comic. So one of the things I want to talk about too. So yeah, we get to this. So this is pretty good. Like this guy right here, that's pretty flexible, and even this guy is sort of similar. So it means that we've gotten to something that's a pretty flexible, nice to use model. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I got there. Basically, if you look, this is the default interface. There's no Dreambooth tab here. There should be. To get that, you go to extensions. You won't, when you come to extensions, this list will probably be empty for you, because in order to install extensions, you have to go to this tab over here, install from URL, or available here, available, load from, and they're going to have this link to a URL for extensions. When you do that, you're going to get this big long list that seems to be growing every day of all kinds of useful extensions that you can install for Stable Diffusion. We'll cover some of these later, but the one that you're really going to be the most interested in here is the fourth one down, this Dreambooth. Dreambooth training based on Shivam Shiaro's repo, optimized for lower VRAM GPUs. Notice I've got it installed. I just don't have it running right now. So you'll click install, and then when you go to installed, it'll be here. You can turn these off and on. Notice the tag autocomplete here. That's how I added the autocompletion of text that I showed you earlier in the text to image. That's another extension that you can use. So we're going to go to the Dreambooth extension, enable that, just check it, apply and restart UI. Here's the trick. When you do that, Dreambooth requires a little bit more than a UI restart. So by clicking apply and restart, you're really going to end up not being able to run Dreambooth, because it hasn't. I'm just trying to send it Um, so what you need to do is click on your console, Control C or whatever, just some key activate, Control C. Okay, C to escape. Interesting. It's like my PowerShell's failed. All right, well, let's just restart the PowerShell. This may mean I need to, so we switch into our Stablediffusion install and then run webUI bat, although I may be running it already since it didn't quit properly. We will see. Now, when you first install Dreambooth, if you go to something I didn't show on the extensions channel, when you install something, you get this link to the GitHub that it comes from. So if you go to and click on that link, you'll go to this Dreambooth extension here, and you'll see down here, and it tells you kind of how to train it using file words, classic tokens. We're going to go through that in a minute. But the thing to know is that they may have actually fixed it because it may be up to date. When you first install, there's some requirements for Dreambooth to work. And it's going to need a certain version of Torch, Python Torch Vision, and it tells you right here setting using these commands to basically get it running. So if you install the Dreambooth extension and you try to run it, and for some reason you get an error in your console when you run it, just realize that there's a mismatch or something in it. Just go to that extension and click on the GitHub and then check out and look for it. And the other thing you can do is if you see an error, copy it and just Google it, right? And there'll be somebody who's figured it out. Okay. So in order to get Dreambooth running, you're going to need a different version of PyTorch. You're going to need a specific version of diffusers. They're both explained here in terms of how to get it, what you need to do. Once you get that, you should be able to run it. And if I hit refresh here, I should get a Dreambooth tab here. So this is Dreambooth, okay? So the way to set up Dreambooth training is, once you've got it installed, is you're going to need a model. I've already trained a bunch of models. Like here's my V9, the one that I liked, the latest. This was the first one that I trained that I liked, that I've slowly built on. It's a little bit backwards in terms of the interface. But here's the tabs you need to worry about for the model stuff, okay? First, you need to create a model. So let's give it a name. We're going to call this Colin Freeman V10. And then you need a train point, or a checkpoint to train, so which will be installed already, or you can install it from Hugging Face. That's a different process. You can look on this GitHub to see how that works. But if you've already got Stablediffusion installed, just pick your 1.5 model or whichever model you want to train. Make sure it's a pure model, i.e. the 1.4 or the 1.5, in order to be able to train it, because if you don't, you're training on top of training, and there's a different process for that, and you'll end up getting some weird results, because like what you're doing when you train this model is you're taking this original 1.5 from that's capable of doing all the Stable Diffusion image generation stuff. You're creating a copy of that because you don't want to overwrite this, and then you're going to take these concepts here and create some new classes for it to recognize. So once we get, let's do half model here. You want to make sure that the scheduler, if you're training faces, you want to make sure that the scheduler is set for DDIM. These others are probably faster, but this will give you the best performance for when you're training photographs of a human face. Then under parameters, we'll fix this in a minute, adjust it. I just want to make sure. Yeah, so you're going to want to use mixed precision, FP16 here. Leave the default attention. I'm going to train as an EMA. It's going to take a little bit more VRAM, but I should have it because if you hold down on this, it says enabling this will provide better results in editability. Then that's pretty much everything for this. Right now, we're not actually doing the training, so the concepts don't need to be filled in yet. We just want to create our copy, the Colin Freeman V10 here, copy of the model. So when you click that and hit create, it's going to run. Takes a minute. If you look at your console, it'll tell you what it's doing. It's create. Should come back with that. Maybe that's only when it's training. So now it's gone and allocated 7.1 of, yeah, see, look, I'm low on RAM here, so I'm probably going to fail because it should have 16. Let me look and see what what's running here. See how it goes. Normally, you're going to have around 16 gigs of RAM available, and it's going to have a certain amount of allocation for that. Let's go to parameters and talk about setting up our range. First, we want to get to concepts. Sorry. So we go to concepts. You're going to go to the directory where you have your images saved. Let's get rid of some of these suits that are kind of muddying the data. So I'm going to lose this and probably this one. This will also, notice I'm taking out the mid shot, so that'll, because I've got plenty here. Keep that one. Let's lose this close up. Yeah, let's delete those. The reason being, I'm trying to get rid of this trend in the last training that had the concept of blue suits so heavily embedded. And I could go and change the color of these, obviously, but it also has this proclivity for ties. So, if you've run enough of the examples, you'd see that. So I'm trying to kind of like alter my previous version, so this one will be slightly different. So once we've got this folder, copy the address, go into our data set directory right here under directories and paste that. Now you'll also want to have class images. In this case, I'm going to have my prompt would be something like a photo of Colin Freeman person. The trick here is like person is a class that it already understands, and this is a modification where I'm creating a kind of person, in this case me, my image. And photo is just a description of the training data that I'm using. It's mostly photos. It's not all photos, but it should be okay because I chose some fairly realistic looking photos. So it's this Colin Freeman person is the trick. And then you're going to have a class prompt. So it's saying, this is equal to this photo of person, except I'm modifying it with Colin Freeman because I want a very specific person that the data should recognize once it's trained. So we're going to have this instance prompt and this prompt. Now, in order to have this prompt work, this person part, it needs a data set, a reference of data to know what that is, right? So that it doesn't like go too far in terms of training this to just be not all persons are Colin Freemans, right? So what you need is you need a path to that. And what you could do is you could create a path here, go down here and put a certain number of images for this total number of class/reg images. And what you're going to want is about 100 to 200 per training image that you have, or close to that, in order to get a good balance between people and you in the data. What you can also do is just go and download from the internet a set of images. So let's go GitHub, class training Dreambooth image set person. Let's see what happens. In the, let's see. Nope, no images here. Sorry, I don't. They might be in. This is the normal stable diffusion. Let's do class images. I will put a link to them in. Let's try this one. Yeah, I'll put a link to them in the link below. I'm just going to show you what they look like right now. So if you come out from this original training folder, regularization, let's do this because this will be found. Let's see. Stable for Dreambooth. Yeah, right here. This guy. Go back to. Yeah, so like this is what we're looking for, the idea of classes of images that are just representations of the thing that you're training it to be modified. So I don't see. I'll put a link to the folder when I find it, but it's going to look like this. You'll go to GitHub and you'll download this from the GitHub repository, and that'll have person, man, girl, and something else. I can't remember. But in that, there's going to be like 1,500 images of persons, the class person. So you can take that, copy that address, go into directory for classification data set directory right here. Paste that. And then that will give you, so here's our training data. Here's our reference data for person. Since we're talking about person, if you were doing man, you'd want to use only the man images or generate your own. So you could go and make a folder there and generate. In fact, well, I don't want to run through that because we may run into an issue. So I'm going to show it this way. And then I'll put in the comments some instructions if you want to modify it. Then you'll want to have a sample image prompt. So it'd be like photo of a Colin Freeman. Be careful how you do this too, because if you put the A in there, it's going to be slightly different. Photo of Colin Freeman person walking on the beach, just as a sample image prompt so that it understands. And then you could try putting negative prompts in there. I haven't had much success with that, so I'll just leave that open. If you change the prompt to have variables or tokens, you're going to want to change the way it's set up here in terms of class token description. So in this case, it's just a description. And this would be a structure. I may go into more kind of advanced tutorial and explain that. And then the total number of config images. This would be if you were generating them, because I think it's just going to see this directory and it won't worry about this. Notice it says image generation. So if you just put a directory in here, you may have an issue with it. I've noticed something's changed in the latest version, but if you give it a directory on your drive that's set up and empty, and you put that in here, and it finds that there's no images there, it will go and try to generate the class reg images, however many you say down here, based on these settings, okay? So there's our concept. We've got our concept set up for this Colin Freeman V10 training. Now, based on the folder that we gave it, you want to have your training steps and your learning rate set up here. There's this little button over here called Training Wizard. If you click that, it will default to the training steps set up based on the number of photos that we have and the learning rate that we have set up here. So this is where a lot of experimentation can happen, because if you go with a faster learning rate, so like if I change this to a 2, and then do that training wizard again, it'll come back with a different number of training steps. So this is a kind of balancing act between how long you let it train and how fast you want it to learn, and the number of images that you have, okay? Looking and doing some research on the web and having run this a couple of times, I find that something like 2 it can work. You can try that. It'll train a little faster, but it'll run for more steps. But you can also do something like 1. That's a slower learning rate, right? And when you do that, you get training wizard, it's going to come back with less steps to train right here. And what will happen is it may do better, okay? So in this case, it's set for this 0001 for 1,800 steps based on the number of images that I have in my folder. So it's doing some multiplication, kind of an equation to calculate. But what I'm doing here is when I have this save checkpoint frequency, it won't get this 1,800 step. It'll save the final one, but it may end up having an issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pump this up to like 2,500. I'm going to go past what it's recommending in case it needs a little bit more training at that point. And by setting these save checkpoint frequencies here, it will have every 500 training steps, it will save a checkpoint. So what this does is it gives you multiple checkpoints in the end to test against versus just one that may not work out and then you have to go and retrain. Because what will probably happen is This 2500 will be overtrained. It won't do so well. And I'll be able to check out the 2000 training step checkpoint. That one may do better. 1500 steps may do better, right? You can, if you have a lot of space on your hard drive, you can set this to 250 steps and get kind of a more granular, because what will happen is when this model gets trained, it will slowly converge to a good model and then quickly overtrain or quickly overfit to the images that you have, depending on your image, the images you use in your data. So you want to have like multiple iterations of checkpoints here so that you don't miss the boat in terms of getting a good model. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at 500. Training steps 2500. Learning rate what they call 1E5, which is just 5 zeros and a 1 in terms of the decimal place. You can leave it at constant learning rate scheduler. And I've got this apply horizontal flip will probably be checked automatically. It just randomly flips the images to get better, kind of more flexible data. And these options will be a more advanced. We don't have to do that right now, but these will be if you want to train multiple concepts beyond the 3 that you can train with this tab. And I just want to double check our batch. If you don't have a GPU, an NVIDIA GPU, you can use a CPU. It will take days to train depending on the number of images and the number of steps. So I don't recommend using that unless you just are desperate. You can also use a Google Colab and do the same thing. You do want the mixed precision here. It'll make the entire model a little bit smaller. And if you run out of memory while you're doing this, it'll fail and you won't be able to complete the training. You'll need to restart and try again, which we may do because, like I said, I might be running a little low on memory here. We'll see how it goes. You do want to have the train text encoder set. I don't have to use the CMA, but I want it because I find it gives better results than without. And that's it. Okay, so once we've got that, just go up here on this train button and click train, and I'll pull up the tab. So you're going to see, okay, it cleaned up, good. Starting training, so I'm on steps. It'll go for 5 steps and do a restart. I think that's kind of a warm up to the training. You notice up here it says training step 0 to 2500. So that's setting the range, and it'll give you an estimate up here once it goes. So it started running through the first 5 steps. Then it gives you a kind of stop. Tells you how much memory is reserved. So I'm back to 16 and how much is allocated. Now it's starting the training, and it's on 17, 18. So it's running through all of those samples. And every 500, it'll save a checkpoint. So I'm going to let this run. I'll pause the video, and then I'll come back and show the results using a bunch of text prompts when it's done training. Okay, so now we've got our trained data. You can tell when it's when your terminal says return result training finished. If you pull down under the models up here, you won't see anything until you hit refresh. So if you hit refresh, now we have a bunch of V10 checkpoints from 500 to 2000. Once you've got that, you can go to text to image, set it on one of those checkpoints. 500 probably is not going to be enough, but let's just do it just to show. Let's take one of our original testing prompts as an image. We'll just grab one from these pre-trained images that I had, and we'll take this one. And then send that to text to image. It's going to load up. Go ahead, and since we loaded up that image, we're going to need to go back to our V10 here. 500. And then run it. Let's see how it looks. So you can tell it's not really returning a face. It's an interesting image, but it's not really the face that I want. So if we go to 1000 checkpoint and run it again, it's better. Close. It kind of resembles me, but let's try 1500. Generate. Better. Definitely getting there. Then let's just look at the 2000 and see. Yep. So we got some good candidates here between the 1500 and the 2000. Let's check out, just run some more tests with different options. So let's try the sculpture again. Take this guy. Send that. And put it back on the, let's try the 1000 again just to see. In the end, you're going to end up having kind of, once you've done this a couple of times, multiple checkpoints to play with, because some will give you better performance in different areas than others, unless you just come up with a really great model. That's kind of what I'm drilling towards, is trying to come up with something that's a little bit more universal in terms of being able to generate all kinds of poses. It doesn't have any biases like suits or anything like that. So let's try the 1000 with the statue. So again, we've got that lengthwise statue. Let's try changing it again to like bust. This marble. I'm going to take the sampling steps down to like 40. Let's run that. It's better. It's not bad. Let's generate another way to test to make sure you've got something that's flexible, is to run like multiple iterations. These are all pretty good, actually. Okay, so we'll leave it at the 1000 here. Let's run something more cartoonish like this guy. So this one is CG version of myself. I dropped the person and changed it to character, and then added some Pixar prompts to it. Let's go back to 1000, and we'll run that. These sculptures are looking really good, actually, for the 1000 checkpoint, which means that somewhere between 1000 and 1500 is probably the sweet spot for this. These aren't bad either. Wow, this is looking like a really good model. in terms of the training for what I'm looking for. Getting a lot of the same directional stuff, so there may be some overtraining in that, but in terms of the look and the styles, it's pretty good. Let's try freeing up the seed and just run that again. Doesn't seem to have the suit bias that it had in the other. Let's try one of these Santa shots. Something like this. These are some examples from previous training prompts. I'm just trying to use those as a comparison so we can get some apples to apples. In this one, it's a J.C. Leyendecker illustration of Santa with a Colin Freeman person face. Christmas themed Saturday Evening Post cover. Colin Freeman face, just doubled it up. And then I took out some negative prompt stuff based on a previous pass. Let's run that on the 1000 and see. So once you get the training done, this is what you do: is you just run your checkpoints to see which ones have responded the best, that cover the most general, kind of wide range of subjects, and then you just move on. So now, let's see what this does. As far as this is a really, this model's looking pretty great for the 1000 checkpoint. Let's try the 1500 and just see. One of the things you can do with this Dreambooth stuff is like use it to modify the model and fix some of the holes that it has. So like you'll notice there's sometimes it has issues with hands. It'll give multiple fingers to hands. So you could theoretically just take a bunch of pictures of hands and call it like fixed hand or something like that, or something with a little less chance of this model is looking great now in terms of hitting the face and generating what I want. Let's try. Let's see, what else have we got to try? Let's take one of these vintage pictures that we started with in a previous tutorial and just add my face into it now. So it's loading that. And all we got to do to modify it is photograph of person here. Instead of person, it'd be a Colin Freeman person now. Let's just try that, see what happens. So yeah, you just check your checkpoints. I'm doing this on the original, sorry, the 1.5. I forgot to change my checkpoint prompt, the checkpoint that I was using. So here's the originals. Let's set it to that 1000. That 1000 seems to be the real sweet spot, although the 1500 is doing okay too. Let's just see what happens. So yeah, you just check the checkpoints that you've come up with. Like I said, there may be two that work well. Like one may be a little bit more flexible in terms of giving you, if you don't want exactly the training that you've used, you just want kind of a hint of that person. These are great. So yeah, that's pretty good for the 1000. And then let's look at the 1500. So yeah, you just check and run these against, different prompts. And the idea is you'll know you're kind of in a good zone when it doesn't take too much text to come up with a good result. Although sometimes you're just going to have to put extra text in there if you really want to drive it, or you don't have to crank up the CFG scale to a much higher number to get the result that you wanted. And when you get to that point, you've got a really, really good model to work with. So if I just take, I'm still on my 1500 here. If I just take Colin Freeman out of that, we should get the original kind of prompt model without the face. Notice that it's throwing in color in the black and white here because I've got restore faces on. We talked about in the previous tutorial how to do that kind of face fix without. You could also send it to image and prompt it to get the face. So now we're back to people without. Let's put Colin Freeman. Let's try something crazy with this one that we haven't done before. So let's do a photograph of Colin Freeman person dressed as a clown at the Bauhaus School in 1920. Let's see what that returns. We're on 1500 here. Yeah, the fact that I'm getting good faces from this model at a CFG scale of 8.5 means I'm in a really nice, and that I'm getting a lot of variability in the results. Like they're not all showing the same image format. These might need more CFG. Photograph of Colin Freeman person dressed as a clown. Okay, so we can't see the face here, right? It's not there. There's a couple of ways we could force it to be in there. We can crank up the CFG scale and see if that forces it. And we can add more reinforcement to the prompt. So yeah, it's having issues getting my face into a clown face. So let's, for one thing, I messed it up with school, so it's missing that. That may have been something that confused it. Let's do Colin Freeman face or clown face underscore face. And for this, we'll leave color and we'll do teeth. I don't, because it's trying to add teeth in there and that can be tricky. The Bauhaus School, it didn't pick that up. Oh, you know what? I could force those two together as well. What I was expecting was something. If you've ever seen photographs of the Bauhaus, it's pretty. It's just trying to put a clown face on me. It's gotten better. Let's try forcing. Let's leave the clown out. Let's do a photo piece. Yeah, leave the clown part out and more than enough weirdness with this prompt to force it to come up with something that might be like a clown. If you've ever seen the photographs, they were always having parties. You got the geometric design in the background. And then a 1920s suit. And that's architecturally something from that style. Anyway, it's doing a good job, this model. Let's do one last test. I want to see. Let's do. Let's just get a JC Leyendecker illustration. Painted by JC Leyendecker. See what that does. Clown faces is something that's tricky for getting this kind of something to watch out for. But that said, you could probably get it to force it. So you'll notice, I don't know if you can tell, but like on more full-length photos, it's going to have more trouble with the face. That's not really a problem, because what you can do, so you can see as it gets more to like the mid-range, it does better. But here's a good example, like this one. Let's take this one and send it to InPaint. And all you got to do to fix that is just select or mask out the face and just say Colin Freeman person face. Yeah, let's just see what that does. We may have to put the JC Leyendecker part in there, but no, it did it. So you got a better face for the photo, and you could adjust it from there. Just that's hopefully that gets the idea across in terms of another way to get this thing to be better, if we wanted, is to, like I said before, crank up the CFG scale. Now, if you go too high, like you can go all the way up to 30 here. Let's run that. It's going to cause some edge haloing and stuff where it's just trying too hard to give you exactly what you've asked for. You'll see in a sec when it's done. And it's just going to have issues with the look of the image. See how it's so contrasty? There's these edge highlights. That's just, you've gone too far. Generally, that'll happen almost all the time on any model if you crank the CFG scale that high. But if you go to 20, it'll probably do better at putting the face in there and give you less of this highlighting or haloing. You can see the hand issues I was talking about there. And you could probably, again, go into InPaint and just like mask those and try for better hands that way. So you see where, yeah, the eyes are a little wonky, but it's doing better. It's giving better faces than it was in those first few passes. And again, those can be fixed. So hopefully that explains how to do the extensions tab, how to work in Dreambooth and train your own model. And then one other little bonus that I want to show is this prompt I found the other day, which was, or this extension that I found the other day, which was this artist study extension right here. So if we hit apply and restart, I believe that one will just load up part of the interface. It's a neat little way of having kind of an encyclopedia of art styles and things to try in your prompts. So now you've got this artist study tab right here next to Dreambooth, and you can click on that and say it's got all of these tabs to go through. So we can do house. Let's just get the images, and you get this huge library of styles to look at, and it'll have the artist listed: anime, hero, Hiko, Araki, right here for these. And so you can come up with, this is definitely anime. It looks like Studio Ghibli, but it's not. But it's a nice way to have like an encyclopedia of artists at your fingers for different styles. So what we're doing is portrait, anime right here. We can do portrait, cartoon. High impact, digital painting. So you get the idea. So this is just another extension that you can load up. Let's see if we can find somebody interesting to add to our trained, or just to try some prompts for a trained model. Let's go with, I'm interested. Let's do anime. And let's do some Dragon Ball Z here. So anime Akira Toriyama. So wish there was a way to click on this and populate it or copy it to actually it looks kind of one piece-ish. Let's do, let's go with this one, the Dragon Ball. So it's anime Akira Toriyama. We'll go up here. So an anime portrait by Akira Toriyama of Colin Freeman person. Let's make sure we got the name right. Text to image. All right, let's try that. I'm on the 1500 checkpoint, so it's not doing so great there. Crank up the config scale. Let's see what it does. So yeah, it's getting more and more in that style by cranking up the CFG. Now, a little negative prompting could help it as well, where we say contrast, this gradient here, so we could do like flat color, cartoon, contrast, and crop, let's say. Doing that in the negative prompt. So now we've lost. Let's try losing the crop. Probably need to reinforce Colin Freeman person again. Let's do face. Anime So you get the idea. The model's working out pretty well. Let's just try this 1000 versus that one. I just want to see if one's better than the other. I feel like the 1500 might be a little. Oh, definitely lost it there. That's interesting. That's why you double check. Let's see. It could have been this random seed. Yeah, see, that one's doing great. The 1000. I thought the 1000 is doing pretty good on certain looks, but I feel like the farther the more you get away from the style of the photos, the more it's going to have issues with. Let's try the 2000 just to see. That's why you don't want to throw these checkpoints away. Move them to another drive. Yeah, see, this one feels like it's overbaked. You can see it's like it's overfitted. Let me just do one more test with it, because like you'll see little gradients and noise. Whereas the 1500 is probably pretty spot on. Let's do it again. It's keeping the hair there, but it lost the goatee. It's got a little bit of a beard. Let's try taking that down. Yeah. So you get the idea. We've come up with a really good checkpoint. Dreambooth. Again, this was using a series of images that I had trained. Let's go back out. I'll show you those again, just to give you kind of a reference for. So it was these. See, I've got these were the originals that I trained the original model on. That were all photographs, and then the better training is some of those, and then about half again as much with some paintings that look kind of photographic, some illustrations. This is like an Alex Ross style. Some actual photos of in suits that were there mainly to take out, the t-shirt bias that it had before. And some different looks. Now, probably what I could do to make this even better is it's got the expressions, but there, if you'll look, there's like only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pictures that have a side shot of the head. Maybe if you count this one, 6. Could get more angled shots in there. Some of these I feel like are wasted, but who knows? Like this open mouth shot here could be something else. It's just one of those things where you can just slowly tweak your data. I would say that you don't need a repeat of anything that this and this are adding. Like basically these 4 images are adding a bias for ties. Actually, these 4. A bias for ties and blue suit jackets, right? So I could go and replace these and just have one with a blue suit, like this one or this one, and then replace these with some other outfit, and I'd probably get even better results. Okay, so you don't have to train this thing forever, but like the better you can come up in terms of getting the model and just getting nice inputs. I haven't figured out how to like get it to rotate the head, so I get some control with angular shots, like looking side. There's probably some tutorials on that, but anyway, it's one of those things you can sink a lot of time into. But once you get to something where you can generate basically anything from anime to a photographic sculpture or a black and white photo, you're doing pretty good with the model. And I would suggest again that you, like in this case, I'm going to hang on to this 1500 and lose the 500, the 1000, and the 2000, because I feel like this 1500 is probably the best model I've trained so far. I'll also keep one of the original ones. This the one let's take a look at this one just to see. This is the V8 version that I generated some of these training images from. And it's pretty good too. Do another, and you can see it's just different. So it's like I've got a different model for multiple takes, right? So in order to generate, there's ways to merge between these two. I could take this model if I like some of its output, and the 1500 that I just trained, and using this checkpoint merger, I could basically blend between those two and get a different model that might perform even better. So hopefully that explains the process of using extensions, where to go find them, how to do Dreambooth training. I'm going to go through these extensions probably for the next video and find some useful ones, maybe do a deform tutorial, but I'm not sure when I'll release that one. But for now, this ought to get you enough info to be able to do whatever you need in Stable Diffusion. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Thanks for listening.